Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Beyond Block by Block in Conversation Curating for Change event. Thank you so much for joining us on this lovely Thursday afternoon. I'm Krish, Dineshkumar, researcher and curator for the Agincourt neighborhood team, and I am your co-host for today's event.
Hi everyone, my name is Maggie To. I'm also your co-host for today, and I'm a researcher and curator for the Parkdale neighborhood. We hope that you find today's segment to be inspirational and engaging, and we also have an ASL interpreter, Timothy Keslick. So thank you for being here and helping us out.
So before we start, we have a few housekeeping rules to go over with all of our community members here. If I could just have Maggie slide to community guidelines. Thank you so much. So as you can see here, please be respectful toward everyone who is sharing their stories and personal experiences. Kindly keep your mics off while people are speaking. Toronto Word Museum, of course, has a zero tolerance policy towards hate speech. Third, this event will be recorded for archival purposes. Of course, if you need to express any questions or concerns pertaining to our event or staff, please direct your message to our chat moderator. And in the chat function, just make sure to select all panelists in Zoom.
Thank you, Krish, for going over that with us. And we'd like to begin today by starting to acknowledge the land that we are in. Sharing stories is at the foundation of Toronto World Museum's mission. As we encourage newcomers to Canada to share their stories of immigration, we also encourage them to hear and respond to the stories of Canada's First Nations. That story begins at least 15,000 years ago on the territory where we all now live, lands are traditional territory of the peoples of Turtle Island. The lands that are now Toronto are the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credits, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. The territory was a subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. The Toronto War Museum is grateful to live and work with them and with newcomers on this territory. Living on this territory makes us all people in Toronto, makes us all treaty people, including those who come as settlers or immigrants of this generation or early generations, including those brought involuntarily as a result of the transatlantic slave trade.
Thank you so much for sharing that land acknowledgement, Maggie. Of course, before we get started here, we'd also like to thank many of the people who made this project possible. And of course, that begins with our funders. So we'd like to thank the Ontario Trillium Foundation, as well as the Inspirit Foundation. Of course, without our funders, this program would not be possible. Alongside our funders, we'd also like to acknowledge and thank our 10 program partners who, over the course of this year, really helped us on the ground in activating this project. So, to begin, we'd love to thank the Agincourt Community Services Association, the City of Toronto Newcomer Office, the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, the Regent Park Film Festival, the Ryerson University School of Urban and Regional Studies, the Toronto Council Fire Native Cultural Centre, the Toronto Community Benefits Network, the Toronto Public Library, West Neighbourhood House, and Working Women Community Centre. Thank you so much for all the support that we received this year. Lastly, we just want to say a very, very big thank you to everyone that has made Block by Block 2020 project possible, particularly behind the scenes. I mean, of course, we really want to thank our incredible storytellers. We want to thank our founding executive director, Gracia Dyer Halia, who first initiated Block by Block. We want to thank our amazing lead researcher and curator, Maggie Hutchinson. We want to thank our citywide production coordinator, Susan Jama. Our phenomenal marketing and outreach coordinator, Ashna Tucker. Our support staff, including Sarah C., Fahima Haq, and James Malakzadi. And lastly, but not least, of course, all of our young neighborhood team researchers and curators. Thank you to everyone mentioned in this list here. This program truly would not be possible without them. Back to you, Maggie.
Thank you, Krish, for all of that. Again, thank you to everyone who made this project possible. And now we'd like to introduce our speaker. I think, as you can notice, she shares the she shares the first name as I do, and she's none other than our lead researcher and curator and program director for our Block by Block 2020 team, Maggie Hutchinson. Please take it away.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you all for being here. Just going to share my screen. And tell you very briefly, you're going to spend most of your time today with these amazing panelists, but just going to give you a brief overview of the Block by Block program for those who aren't familiar with it. So Block by Block is a program of the Toronto Ward Museum. We're a museum without walls, dedicated to telling stories of migration and settlement. And as a community engaged museum, our programming is always co-developed and co-delivered by community members and community partners, many of whom have been mentioned today. So at a glance, Block by Block is a program that preserves and animates stories of migration, settlement, and civic life in Canadian immigrant neighborhoods. We see it as an ongoing conversation about lived experiences, about marginalization, about resilience, and about the future. And it's a program that builds solidarity as well between communities. We first ran the program in 2017 nationally in Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto. And we're currently in 4 Toronto neighborhoods, all of which are experiencing significant redevelopment. And those neighborhoods are Agincourt, Victoria Park, Regent Park, and Parkdale. So each year, Toronto Ward Museum hires neighborhood teams to run Block by Block, and they consist of 1 local programming coordinator and 3 young researcher curators, some of whom you'll meet today, as well as arts professionals, graphic designers, audio editors, photographers, etc. And the work is supported, as Krish mentioned, by 10 program partners who meet quarterly. And our primary funders are the Ontario Trillium Foundation and the Inspirit Foundation. So over the next few years and since 2019, what we are producing in Block by Block is an archive of 120 oral histories, in-depth oral histories. These include photographs, transcripts, audio recordings, videos. A series of local exhibitions. A series of block parties, which are interactive events. An evolving online exhibition, which you can view today, and I'll give you the URL shortly. And in 2022, we'll be producing a citywide exhibition and series of events. So here are just a few images from past Block by Block exhibitions, back when we could gather in person. And our events are always interactive. They're a chance to share stories, for people to hear other stories and also share some of their own. So obviously 2020 has looked a little bit different for Block by Block. Some of the ways that we've adapted is we switched, our team was really resilient and switched to remote oral history interviews in March and April. We continued our community outreach remotely. And we pivoted our fall exhibition and programming plans. So our outcomes this year, nonetheless, are quite remarkable, I think. The team's done an amazing job. We've produced 26 original posters for poster exhibitions in local businesses and essential services. We've also produced 26 short video stories, which are in an online exhibition. We've distributed 400 original printed coloring kits and stories. And we're running a series of virtual events, including this one. And we've also created a number of online engagement activities. Here's an image from one of our poster exhibitions. These are in the 4 neighborhoods we're working in at over 25 sites. And most of them are in windows, so they can still be seen during lockdown. And as for our online exhibition, the URL is right here. I really recommend the videos that the team produced. And you can also see the posters online on the website, but go see them in person in a window if you can. So the final thing I'll speak about are just some of our core practices, which I think the panelists will get much deeper into, but here's some of what makes this program the success that it is. And I'll just tell you a bit about those. First, we hire racialized and newcomer residents to conduct research with and for community members in their neighborhoods. And they draw on their own social and cultural networks to do this research. We also support the work of our neighborhood research teams through multi-sector partnerships, particularly with agencies that serve Indigenous community members and new immigrants and refugees. We seek leadership and support from our partner agencies when designing consultations, exhibitions, and events to ensure that we meet community needs. We co-create with community members through story sharing, intergenerational exchange, cultural and arts-based methods. And we disseminate our stories through high quality arts-based exhibitions, both physical and virtual, as well as interactive events. So that's a bit about our program, and I'll turn it back to our brilliant panelists to tell you much more in depth about these practices. Thank you.
So thank you, Maggie, so much for sharing Block by Block's core principles and what we've been able to achieve throughout the years, especially this year. Now that we are in a virtual world, it's phenomenal to think that we've been able to do all of this, create 26 original posters, film and edit 26 stories as well. And we also want to thank our storytellers for making all of this possible. We see some storytellers here at the event, so thank you for joining us. And thank you to all those in the chat saying that they've seen the posters, they love it. We're really happy to hear that. So for those that actually haven't been able to see our exhibition in this, so if you'd like to view our full exhibition, including our videos and our posters, you can visit our website, which is, Maggie have said it in the, I think the team have dropped it in the chat box as well. It's wardmuseum.ca/blockbyblock. And if you look, you can also follow us on our social media, which is @TO_WardMuseum. As Maggie said, a huge part of our accomplishment this year includes virtual events. And so our next event is a Beyond the Block, a celebration, which will be taking place this Saturday, November 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. And it will be featuring live music and spoken word performances. And some of our storytellers will actually be performing for you. So we highly encourage that you attend if you can. Really excited to share this celebration with all of you. So now I'm going to pass it back to Krish.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for that recap. I'm really, really looking forward to Saturday's event. I know a lot of hard work has gone into preparing for that. So we really hope to see as many of you out there as we can come Saturday. Now on to our main event, the panel discussion. Please note we will have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any burning questions for our curators and researchers, please use the Zoom Q&A function in the bar that you see at the bottom there. So I'm going to introduce our panelists for today. Please help me welcoming them here. First, we have Ahmed Hegazy, local coordinator for the Regent Park team. We have Brannavy Jeyasundaram, a researcher and curator for the Agincourt team. We have Nipuni Kuruppu, a researcher and curator for the Parkdale team. And we have Soha Mohamed, a researcher and curator for the Victoria Park team. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. And I'll pass it on to Maggie To get it started with the panel discussion.
Thank you, Krish, for that. So now we would just like to have a conversation with our panelists to learn more about the work that they do and what Block by Block is all about and what it means to them. So before we begin, this is a question to all the panelists. We've been hearing the term young researcher and curator interchangeably throughout this conversation so far. So can you tell us a bit about that role and what it means and what drew you to the Block by Block program?
I'll start. I'm Brannavy Jeyasundaram. I'm a researcher and curator at the Agincourt team. And I guess researcher and curator is like a twofold role. You're trying to understand the migration stories that exist within your neighborhood. So a huge part of the early stages of our role was really doing a lot of on the ground research as to how people arrived and how the neighborhood evolved and exists as it is today. And then the curation aspect is really collecting stories and identifying storytellers. And there's a lot of questions that go into that process of making sure that the storytellers within your neighborhood are representative and carry a wide-ranging history of experiences. I think what really attracted me to this role was that I've never come across a program that combined like placemaking with oral histories and then tied that to a neighborhood. And Agincourt is such a special neighborhood for me. Like growing up as a child, it kind of formed like a staple on my weekend when I would go to dance classes, and then inevitably my family would do their weekly grocery shopping because that's where all the Tamil grocery stores are. And Agincourt is kind of a nucleus for Tamil life in many ways. And then with that, what I'm trying to say is that the ties that we share to the neighborhood like very much inform our curatorial practice.
Thank you, Brannavy.
I can go ahead. My name is Ahmed, and I'm a local coordinator for the Regent Park team. And I guess what that means or has meant has been drifting throughout the year. I really sort of started out just making sure that the team was on track with the deadlines and with dates and with tasks that we had to do, but with sort of the COVID situation and us having to reimagine how the project was going to look like. I've taken on so many different roles, a little bit of sort of keeping people on track role, but I think most of my time was spent just supporting throughout in different capacities, whether it's tech, whether it's some of the curation, some of the research, and a little bit of music composition. So yeah, and I guess what drew me to the project was I think it just really embodies a lot of the work that I'm interested in doing, which is engaging community through arts. But I hadn't worked at a museum before, but I was really interested in the Ward Museum's reimagining of what a museum could look like, and that's something that really centers community voices and collaboration and things like that, which is more often than not not included in sort of mainstream ideas of museums.
Thank you, Ahmed. Does Nipuni or Soha want to go next?
I can go. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Soha, and I'm a researcher and curator for the Victoria Park team. So me personally, so I have a background in international development studies and social work. And so I've been always sort of on this pursuit of better societies for everyone and eliminating things like discrimination and injustice and food insecurity. And so I've worked in the Victoria Village community for a few years now, specifically working in the Victoria Park Hub, doing outreach and engagement work and newcomer support. So I learned of the the Block by Block project last year when I watched our coordinator Fatima and my colleague Stephanie put together this incredible exhibition at the hub, and seeing how some of our local residents and their stories were being represented at the exhibition and seeing how proud we were. It was a storytelling project, but it was also this morale project where our community it had such a positive impact in our community. Our spirits were uplifted. And that positive impact made me realize that there's different ways to battle adversity and injustices and negative connotations, and through storytelling and highlighting people's lived experiences and learning that way. That's what drew me to this project, and that's why I wanted to join this year.
Thank you so much, Soha. And finally, Nipuni.
Hi, I'm Nipuni. I'm a part of the Parkdale team as a young researcher curator. I think the other panelists really spoke to what Block by Block is about, and I'd like to echo what they've said. I think Block by Block is a really unique program in Toronto, especially given how dynamic and changing it is. I think a lot of the stories from these 4 different neighborhoods, they tend to go unnoticed, and they're really misrepresented, underrepresented. And I think that's really what drew me to Block by Block, and specifically Parkdale, because I know that in the news, Parkdale is portrayed in a specific way that isn't accurate to its character. And by being able to conduct the oral histories in Parkdale and also help curate the exhibition, I've definitely learned a lot about the residents of Parkdale and the residents of Toronto, and getting to interact with these storytellers and these researcher curators has been a really important and fruitful experience for me.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughts. So I've actually had the privilege to work with Brannavy, Ahmed, Soha, and Nipuni in all different capacities. And I think what's really interesting about Block by Block is that there's a lot of professional development opportunities. I think like Soha and Ahmed and Brannavy and Nipuni touched on, like we've all took something away from it, and we've all contributed something of ours to it. So I guess my next question to all of you is, in this curation process of yours that you've had the opportunity to do outreach, to connect with storytellers, have you looked at your neighborhood differently now, or like is there a new light that you see it in, or like have you learned something that you never thought you would take away from this project? No worries, everyone. Take your time. Anyone can unmute and just talk.
So I think for me, I guess, I was thinking that this project, there was going to be maybe some resistance in the community. And I think we've had this conversation before because, again, like I've been a part of and led many initiatives. And so I think, and there's been some talk with people feeling, sometimes they feel exploited with these projects. Again, of course, we were very careful with it, but I think I was surprised, and I'm sure it was the way we handled it too, but people, the whole community felt really, really safe with Block by Block in the Toronto Ward Museum's hands. And so I think I was very, very pleasantly surprised with usually what would have been some resistance, people kind of just like, I would love to know more about this, and I would love to even be a storyteller myself.
Yes, thank you, Soha. As a young researcher and curator myself, I've definitely been so surprised and in awe of how generous storytellers are to share their vulnerable and traumatic experiences with us. So it's definitely inspirational. So we're gonna move on to the next question unless someone wants to answer that one. Ahmed has, yep, go ahead, Ahmed.
Yeah, I also think what Soha said really resonated with me. For various reasons, community members could be uncomfortable or not trust various organizations who want to work with them. But I think that also, like Soha mentioned, we were trying our best to be as transparent as possible throughout the whole process with how this, what we were going to do with this material, how it would be circulated and distributed, and I think we also just wanted as much as possible for the storytellers to have a say in how they're represented. So it was, always a back and forth with them throughout the whole process. So yeah.
Thank you, Ahmed. This is actually the perfect segue to my next question. So this question is for Brannavy and Ahmed. So every year we have a new Block by Block team working on this project, as mentioned by Maggie H. They are trained in oral history methods and community outreach, and then they co-create exhibitions to share back the stories they've heard with the community. So we'd like to hear we'd like to hear from both of you about the power and the challenges of collecting oral history.
Yeah, this was my first time participating in an oral history project, or even like collecting them particularly, and I've learned so much. And oral history, it really does feel like a way, it's enabled us to receive stories and knowledge from people that share a lot of wisdom, but they're often excluded from traditional collection methods. So to speak to Soha and Ahmed's response to the earlier question, and Maggie's note about how each of our neighborhoods are going through rapid processes of development, there are, community consultations or recommendations that are developed through these like consultations that are often very superficial and don't necessarily value what people are sharing, and it's very easy to find them like disingenuous or just grow tired of them. So with an oral history, you're given the time and the space to really connect and learn about someone's life in a way that feels very intimate. And you're able to connect with people that are excluded from these processes, like elders and people that don't necessarily speak English. And one example that comes to mind is an oral history my team member Jane collected from a woman named Virginia, and she collected the oral history in Cantonese because Virginia's English is limited. And Virginia is the founder of Hongkei Dance and Fitness, which is a staple in the Dragon Center Mall, which is an iconic mall in Agincourt and other places around the area. And the dance or the fitness club that she facilitates is kind of like a source of like community for a lot of Asian elders in Agincourt. And there's a vivid moment she describes in her oral history where she crosses a park because she hears music and she stumbles upon a Tai Chi class, and that becomes a very pivotal moment for her and is what inspires her to eventually found her own dance club that becomes Hongkei. And it's these details, the imagery and the texture of that moment that I don't think we'd ever be able to receive if it wasn't for the oral history method. So it allows us to learn from elders who are knowledge keepers in their neighborhood. And it's been, really profound in that way. And really special. I think the limitations obviously come with the pandemic. Mostly a lot of our training in the beginning was how to produce a space that was safe for storytellers to feel comfortable to share. And much of that couldn't be put into practice because we were suddenly isolated in our rooms and did these interviews virtually. So that connection, we couldn't replicate that. And there is a level of impersonal, like a nature of just like a passivity in like talking over the phone that I think we lost in the process.
Thank you for sharing that, Brannavy. And to add on to your point about how these knowledge keepers within our community, I think what's so beautiful about Block by Block or this project, or just again stories in general, is that so many of our storytellers in the beginning, they're like, really, you want my story? It's not that interesting. Like, why would anyone want to hear it? I think a lot of immigrants especially are conditioned to think that their stories doesn't matter. I think it's also back to the point you said, they've been excluded from traditional history and storytelling methods. So it was really beautiful to see at the end result when a lot of storytellers wanted to take pictures with their posters, or they were sharing with their family, like, hey, look, it's me, it's my video. That was really beautiful. And I think someone in the chat box said it was really nice seeing, listening to Virginia's stories in Cantonese. I think that was really beautiful as well. So thank you for that, Brannavy. And Ahmed, what do you think about all of this?
I completely sort of agree with what Brannavy and Maggie have shared about oral history being an opportunity for us to really center perspectives and narratives that are often written out of or marginalized in sort of traditional or mainstream historical accounts. And I think for me, just this experience throughout the year has made me realize just how much everyone, like Maggie mentioned, everyone has a different story and a different perspective and a different lived experience to share and articulate, and that only they could know. and only they could hold. And I think that unfortunately, stories like these aren't often given the weight that they should be given in all avenues of life, really. And I think that if we were to really center stories like these in everything, in you know, politics and in everyday life, I think we would be living in a much better, more just world. In terms of challenges, I also think, yeah, it's exactly what Brannavy said. It transitioning to sort of talking to people virtually and on the phone. I think, you know, we're having to filter out a lot of things through just technology. You know, people are speaking on the phone, it's going through a recorder, it's you know, there we're not seeing each other, or if we are, we're seeing each other through, you know, a 2D screen. And so no matter what, there will be things that are lost. But at the same time, I think that we really tried our best to capture the magic that we were listening to through these stories. And all of us did a lot of research on figuring out different tactics and methods to use when doing remote interviews. And so everything from like the texture of you know, the audio to you know, the colors of the posters were a point of conversation. But yeah, absolutely, I think, you know, the you know, the situation now definitely brings a lot of limitations, but it's important to figure out ways to work within them, and I think we tried our best to do that.
Thank you, Ahmed. Yeah, I completely agree that all the storytellers came in with different lived experiences and all from different backgrounds. Yet in all the stories between all four neighborhoods, you see this common thread of like community love, but also systemic issues. So that was really beautiful to see. So thank you all for sharing your answers with me so far. I'm going to pass it on to my co-host, Krish, to continue asking questions.
Thanks so much, Maggie. Thank you, Ahmed and Brannavy, as well. Ahmed, you mentioned that these stories really carry weight, and they very much deserve to kind of to be heard and to be shared. And I think in addition to that, they deserve to be treated and handled with care as well, right? Of course, you mentioned this kind of challenge that comes with also doing things remotely. Brannavy kind of mentioned that as well. There's this an intimacy or perhaps a kind of comfort that is lost when you do things virtually. But in addition to that, there also do raise concerns around surveillance and privacy as well, which of course, you know, is something that we really needed to keep an eye on. So I think that really segues into, you know, the question that I want to ask both Nipuni and Soha is to kind of learn a little bit more about what the community engaged curation look like. You know, what were the core principles and how did you make sure that these stories were ethical and representative and well received in the community? Maybe I'll start with Nipuni.
Yeah. So just to make sure that these stories were representative of what was going on in the neighborhood, because each of the four neighborhoods had different issues going on and like different topics that were important. We kind of sat with our own neighborhood groups and we kind of curated a list of groups from our own neighborhoods that we felt were most representative of what was going on and who we wanted to reach out to. We went to sort of community outreach events. I remember going to the Parkdale's People Economy event to do some outreach there. It was, we got a good reception there. But after we kind of did do our rounds of outreach and collected our storytellers, something that was really integral to the process was having an informed consent process. So that was through a form of a consent form that we went through during a pre-interview process. We used the pre-interview to see if the storyteller was a right match for Block by Block, but to also see if the project was the right fit for these storytellers, for these individuals, because they were trusting us with their stories. So the informed consent process, it ensured that they were knowledgeable about what they were consenting to. So whether that be archiving their stories, whether that be interviewing, whether that be keeping their interviews, what they wanted to share with us, the photos that were used, if they wanted their photos shared, if they wanted their name shared. And something that was important was to make sure each step of the way they knew that they could withdraw their consent at any moment, and whatever they did contribute, if they were fine with it at one moment, if they weren't fine with it later, that was important that they knew that they didn't have to stick with it and keep it as something, a part of the exhibition, if they didn't want to. So something that we did was each draft of the exhibition, each draft of the materials, we went back to the storytellers and obtained consent to make sure that they thought the images and words were accurate. That was something that was really important to us. We wanted to make sure that they felt what we were creating reflected what they told us. We also had like a pilot event. Some neighborhoods had virtual storytelling sessions in July, which allowed our storytellers for each neighborhood to get to know each other a bit within their own neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods, such as Parkdale, we created a zine, and that also involved a lot of obtaining consent from these storytellers, because again, we were sharing personal details of their lives and we wanted to make sure they were comfortable with that. And it's important to make sure that they ultimately had control of their stories and their narratives.
Yeah, that's super insightful. I think the big takeaway for me, and I think you really covered that well, is that while we are doing archiving work, these are members of communities who are living. They're very much continuing to live their lives, and as we all certainly experience and experience changes in our lives, being able to reflect that, and really providing that agency for the storytellers to make sure those changes are reflected, changes in mind or changes in how they're feeling about the work. Yeah, thank you so much. Soha, is there anything you wanted to add to what Nipuni shared?
Yeah, so, Nipuni did such a fantastic job at sort of highlighting our process and how detailed it was and how much consent was involved. And this is such an important process and an important question. What I can tell you is, again, we were very, very careful throughout the whole process. Our storytellers were actually quite shocked at the amount of approval and consent we needed from them. And, even from after we had our storytellers and with the interview process itself, there was a pre-interview, which was like introductory and basic questions, getting to know our storyteller. And then there was this like mammoth interview guide created with, categories and subcategories, which then even some of us had to like tailor so that it was more fitting for each individual storyteller. So we were really completely mindful of their identity and who they were. We sought approval for everything: social media, quotes, pictures, audio, making sure that they were okay with absolutely everything before it was being put out there. And then also giving them the liberty to change their mind. If they were, maybe one piece was, maybe we wanted to remove that part, we gave them obviously the liberty to do that. And then for us, just extra sensitivity around some of our storytellers. For example, like a storyteller, like being a little bit more specific to my neighborhood, the Victoria Park neighborhood, a storyteller whose status was kind of precarious in Canada. And the storyteller personally told me, hey, Soha, I love this project. And as an African, storytelling is like my ancestral way. But in this country, I don't have anything. I don't even have my status. I don't own a home. I'm precariously employed. My children are even back home. And so all I have is my story. And actually, like, her experiences and her story is what even got her here. And so that made me like really emotional. And it applied pressure, like an immense amount of pressure. Like, I was like, girl, don't worry. I have 2 kids, but your story will be my 3rd baby. And I got you. I'm going to handle your story with the utmost care. And as my team and I did with all of our other stories, as every neighborhood team did, and just making sure their stories were always dignified and that we were always protecting their stories, them, how they wanted to be represented, and just making sure that they were always a part of the process and they were represented how they wanted to be.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think sharing this specific incident with the storyteller, I think it highlights the kind of intersection of, like, obviously the archiving work that we want to do, but the very kind of serious community building work that we want to do and relationship building that we want to do. Because as it was kind of identified really early on, when storytellers are kind of surprised by the consent process and just how much, agency we want to provide them, it at least for me, it made me think, like, I think this is a consequence of people being conditioned to believe that their stories don't matter, right? And that their lived experiences don't matter. So much so that they shouldn't have control over, how it's shared and what gets shared. So yeah, thank you both for sharing that. Thinking to the kind of to the work that we're kind of doing, and of course the sensitivities and thought that kind of goes behind it. Soha and Nipuni, I'd love to ask, do you have any advice to other communities or groups that want to collect stories as well? And what would you share to them? Soha, maybe I'll start with you this time.
Sure. So I would say just take your time with the process and don't rush it, don't force it, and handle stories with care, and take pride in that. So many of us are closed off in this world. So when you have someone who's willing to share, it's really an honor. Have a solid plan. There were so many steps, like Nipuni highlighted, just a few. There's so many steps, so many meetings, so many action plans. Maggie Hutchinson, she's just absolutely incredible. Like, there was so much to think about and all the T's were crossed, all of the I's were dotted. And I think also self-reflection is important. So sometimes hearing stories can be like really overwhelming. So just giving yourself some time to kind of process what you just heard, and think about how it is affecting you as well, or what effect it had on you. But yeah, it's not a quick, like, I think in the beginning, I didn't think it was going to like move like this slow, but I appreciate how it did, because I got to really appreciate everyone's story and really take my time with it.
Thanks so much, Soha. Nipuni, is there anything you wanted to add in terms of your reflection on, what kind of advice you'd share to anyone who'd like to do something similar?
Yeah, I think Soha's completely right about the self-reflection piece. I think one thing that I would advise, and something that we went through as a team, was to learn how to set clear boundaries between yourself and your storytellers, because they are trusting you with an incredible amount of trauma sometimes, a lot of personal details about their lives, and it can be overwhelming for you. So also provide that support and empathy for your storytellers, but also explain your role. You're interviewing them, you're a curator, you're a researcher, you're collecting those stories. So always have a resource sheet on hand of other community resources that you can point them to that can better support their trauma and their needs, but also be empathetic with yourself and your capacity level. Like, what can you handle hearing at this moment? I think that's really important. Another piece that I would touch on is being intentional about your outreach. Kind of like ask yourselves, who do you want to collect these stories from? Why are you collecting these stories? Who does it serve? I think that's really important, because it kind of helps you curate the outcome that you want, and you should tailor it to each project that you're working on, obviously. Another thing is be intentional about the questions you ask. So I think Soha also touched on this. Each block by block neighborhood curated their own interview guides, and then we would further tailor them to meet the needs of our individual storytellers. That's really important. I like to use Brandon Stanton's Humans of New York as an example, because I really appreciate his work. So things like asking open-ended questions always get the best response, like tell me about XYZ, or how did XYZ change your perspective on this life situation, etc. So like this, I feel, is a lot better than closed-ended questions, and it allows these questions to be asked with multiple storytellers, and they're really customizable.
Yeah, brilliant. I think the points you made specifically about making sure that all kind of members involved are feel safe and feel comfortable and feel like there is a safety net, particularly because it can become challenging as you go along. But I love your suggestion about thinking about the kind of humans of New York model. It's also something I have been quite fond of for the past couple of years. So thank you, Soha, and thank you, Nipuni, for sharing your insights on that. A question I'm going to transition back to Brannavy and Ahmed here. Very similarly to the last question, just looking towards the future and looking forward towards this work in particular. How do you both feel that this archive can contribute to the future? Brannavy, would you like to start?
Sure. So even like when our programming was like completely turned upside down with the pandemic, we were very intentional about our stories, making sure our stories were released for people, for the public. So our posters are available across like community sites, our videos are easily accessible online. And that like varies from, I think, traditional archiving models where, there's all of this great content kind of in a cardboard box. You need like specific access to even, learn what's inside. So we want like community members, especially, not necessarily people in power, but we want like children, adults, and elders to engage with the materials that we've created and in turn learn about people that they live near. Learn about their neighborhood, learn about, one of our posters is like a shout out to Kunafa's, which is a restaurant in Victoria Park, and seeing that and like learning that you have a shared love for this one restaurant. I think it makes you it just makes you excited to live where you live, but also more empathetic to the people around you, and especially knowing how they came here, so their migration histories. And that, I think, orients you towards the future because there is a strong, in each of our neighborhoods, which have been historically underserved, there's a strong culture of care for one another, but also like as small as it is, and I don't want to, uplift people that are like change makers or whatever, but there's like really beautiful programming that might serve like people in one household, but still believes in the idea of a future. And just being able to access that through these materials that are specifically curated to be not only like aesthetically pleasing, but like share things in a way that you don't necessarily receive detail from at like a more sterile museum. I think it makes you, this is corny, but it makes you hopeful. And I think that's a really meaningful thing.
Thanks a lot, Brannavy. Sometimes we need that corniness, as hard as it is to admit sometimes. Ahmed, did you care to add to that at all?
Sure. Yeah. I think similarly to Brannavy, our priority, I think, was throughout the whole process the storytellers, and how they are going to engage with the stories and how they're going to share these stories with their families and friends and pass them on potentially for generations to come. I think that for me personally, that was really the core and what guided me throughout the whole year. And I also think that um, these stories can also be really valuable um, resources for people who are educators, and want to sort of share with their students the ways that people live throughout the whole city, and a lot of things could come out of that. Students could feel represented in one way or another, and I think the stories are so really cover so much ground that they could be, you know, shared from a historical lens. They could be shared through a literature lens. They could be shared through sociology, whatever. There are so many different ways that people can engage with these amazing stories. Um, I also, um, lastly, I think that these stories are really a testament to how these communities are self-sustaining in many ways. They you know, take care of themselves, take care of each other, and you know, even if not, they you know, are figuring it all out on their own. um, I think that in all of the neighborhoods that we've worked with, there have been um, over the past few years or historically, um, a lot of things that have been done on behalf of them, in terms of, you know, buildings, you know, businesses, so on and so forth. Um, but I really believe that if, you know, um, in terms of how, you know, these neighborhoods should be, you know, should change, or whether or not they should change, should be something that the community members are deciding for themselves, not developers or governments or corporations. And so, yeah, I think that that's my hope for the future. Well, an example of that, I think I just wanted to give a shout out to Regent Park Coalition, um, who McGill, who's in the audience right now, is part of. Bless his heart. So Regent Park Coalition has been working to guarantee community benefits um, for the Regent Park neighborhood, for the phases 4 and 5 of the revitalization. And I just think that they really do incredible work to make sure that, you know, all of the things that were done wrong in the neighborhood aren't repeated. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that as well.
I'm so sorry, everyone. And Ahmed, that was a really great answer. I just have to go now. And so I thank you for having me on your panel. It was wonderful to be a part of the Block by Block team. And I hope everyone continues to enjoy, for the next little while at least, the posters that we have everywhere across the city. So thank you so much for having me, and I have to go now. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Soha. Take care. Thank you so much for joining us. I do want to do a time check here. I know it's 1:03, and originally we had this event scheduled until 1 p.m. We do want to do a Q&A until 1:15. Of course, we completely understand if anyone has to go. Of course, we want to thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and spending this time with us and engaging with this work. Of course, we hope to see you this upcoming Saturday at our event. But for the next 12 minutes or so, just until 1:15, we will be extending this event just to answer some of the questions that were asked by our audience members here. So I'm going to open up the Q&A here. So I'll ask this first question here for our panelists to think about. And this one was asked by Donna. The question is, would you say that collaborating and storytelling within Block by Block is transformative of you, the partners, the storytellers? How would you describe the transformations you've observed or experienced? Can you share some examples? It's a great question. Sorry. Go ahead, Nipuni.
Yeah, I can just quickly answer that. I do think the storytelling has been transformative, and I think a lot of the storytellers that have participated in our program for 2020 have been really engaged and have taken something out of it. And I think something that has warmed my heart and a lot of the hearts of everyone who has been involved in this project is seeing how excited some of our storytellers have been. Maggie she interviewed Waleed for Parkdale, and his story is something that really stood out to me, and the stuff that he said, and how excited he was to participate in sharing his story has something that has stuck with me and a lot of our team members as well. And I hope it has been a transformative process for him and the rest of our storytellers, and it's definitely been exciting for us to hear a lot from our storytellers.
Yeah, truly. Sorry, go ahead, Maggie.
Thank you, Nipuni and Krish. I just want to jump in and ask that. Thank you, Donna, for asking this question. It's a really well-written question. I think for me, it was definitely transformative. So I'm currently a researcher and curator for the Parkdale neighborhood. And I was actually born and raised in Parkdale. I still live in Parkdale. I've lived in Parkdale for over 20 years. And I think what is really transformative is it really makes you reflect, because I think Nipuni mentioned it, that the way Parkdale is portrayed in the media is really negative, a lot of stereotypes. And for me to say that, oh, it doesn't affect me, like it's a lie. Growing up, I've heard a lot of things, and I've come to realize that like there's a lot of internalized stigmatization on my end and stereotypes, even though I live here. And it's, for the longest time, it's hard to see that beauty in it. And I think, I forgot which storyteller from the four neighborhoods touched on it, but someone touched on that, that mentality of just wanting to get out. Like you just want to leave this neighborhood, because I think a lot of it is associated with socioeconomic status. And like once people hear, oh, you're from Parkdale, you're from Regent Park, then okay, then you're part of that bracket, that tax bracket. So you don't want to be associated with that. But then when you get to uncover these beautiful stories within Parkdale, Parkdale love, this community care, you come to realize I'm like, hey, like it's actually great that you live in this neighborhood. There's a lot of beauty to it. Like Nipuni said, I actually got the privilege to interview Waleed, someone who's lived in Parkdale for nearly 30 years. And he's just really inspiring. And for me to see how like he's been through all the changes, how like he used to rent a house for like $200 to $300, but now rent has increased to this much. Yeah, he still sees the beauty in Parkdale. It's just phenomenal. So yeah, the biggest piece for me, the transformative piece, is definitely just to start like uncovering these little pieces of beauty within the neighborhood that I've never got to see, even though I was born and raised here.
Thank you so much, Maggie and Nipuni. To be mindful of time here, I'll keep moving here to another question asked by an audience member named Annie. This question says it's more for Brannavy, but anyone is welcome to participate and to answer. During your research in the Agincourt neighborhoods, what will be the most challenging, or what were some of the challenges faced, and how did you perceive and handle the challenges? So maybe for the other panelists, we'll replace Agincourt with your respective neighborhood teams. But if Brannavy would like to start, go for it. But if any other team members is good to go, please feel free.
I'm sorry, my dad just walked into the room. Thanks, Annie. This is a good question. I think with Agincourt and with the project in general, because we are collecting migration stories, so oral histories from racialized communities and Indigenous peoples, there's a motivation to do so, because these stories are oftentimes like undermined, and they're not like but the time and care hasn't been afforded to them historically. So it's exciting to be a part of this work. But at the same time, when people come from specific backgrounds, I was very cautious of like pigeonholing their story, because they were a Tamil storyteller, and they were likely their parents were refugees. And I have had to grapple with this myself, because I write about my identity as a second generation person, and my parents being refugees. And I didn't want to fall into those narratives, and I wasn't trying to like gain insight on information that could have potentially been traumatizing for them. So navigating that, making sure that I'm honoring their story, but also not like tokenizing or even fetishizing their story, was something that the team really, when we were preparing our interview guides, took a lot of care and importance with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously really exciting to think about story sharing, and there's likely a lot that we want to share with the world, particularly when we think about our lived experiences in proximity to these storytellers. But it very much is an intentions versus impact type of moment, right? Where you have to sit and think about what your ideas or how you might kind of go about the work, and in what ways that might impact the very people you want to support. Thanks very much, Brannavy. Is there anyone else who wanted to add to that? No worries, no worries. Let me move on here then. I'm going to ask here, this is a great question. Has work on this project changed your professional pathways in any ways? Do you see yourself being a part of the museum and heritage field, or motivates you to perhaps start new organizations similar to Toronto Word Museums that provide alternate and healthier models for doing community engaged work? We need more voices and perspectives like yours in the museum field. This is a question asked by Irina.
I'll go ahead and answer that a little bit. I actually am studying, I'm a part of creative industries at Ryerson. So I am studying curatorial practices. And I think that working with Block by Block has really informed what I do want to continue doing. I think I really like community. I've come to really appreciate and like working in a community arts organization and focusing on uploading community stories. I think because I've worked on Block by Block, it's kind of solidified what I want to continue doing. And I think it's really important work as well.
Agreed. Thanks very much, Nipuni.
I can speak on this as well. Yeah, I think I'm definitely very much interested in working in community arts, broadly defined and defined. But I think that everything that I've learned throughout this whole year has already impacted my work in other contexts. And I think, you know, Toronto Ward Museum sort of might be considered a museum, but at the same time, it really is like it really covers so much more than that. I think there's a lot of sort of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary work that's being done in the organization and amongst us, which really sort of could spill into so many different you know, ways of engaging with community and arts. So yeah, I think definitely more interested in curation and museum practices, but I also think that, you know, a part of the work that we've been doing is sort of understanding, you know, understanding how you know things are interconnected in it, you know, and could be interconnected in newer museum spaces.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Ahmed. Talking about interconnectivity, I certainly hope amidst kind of all this learning and exploring that you do, you find a way to continue to interconnect music amongst all this, because you're an incredible artist, and you did a really wonderful job with the music and the videos that were put together for Block by Block. Thank you to all of our panelists here today. Thank you for everyone who's joined us. Thank you to Timothy. Thank you to my lovely co-host Maggie as well. This has been a really, really wonderful event. Thank you for all the questions asked and for spending time with us reflecting on this really, really spectacular and challenging year. Of course, we want to respect everyone's time, and hope you enjoy the rest of your days. As mentioned, we do have an event this upcoming Saturday. Please take a look in the chat here for links that lead you to sign up for the event. We really hope to see you out. We hope you're able to take a look at all the posters and all the video content that we have up for this project this year. And we hope you have a lovely day. Thanks again to all of our panelists. Thanks to everyone who's joined here. We hope to see you soon. Take care then.